Welcome to the Beau Show. At Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, there is a companion libertarian-themed film festival called the Anthem Film Festival. One such film being presented at this festival and a subsequent award winner was a short documentary called Life Behind the Berlin Wall by Dr. Rainer Zitelmann, an author, historian, and sociologist. He profiles what life was like in these two neighboring but radically different economic systems, with the Soviet-style socialist system in the East and the parliamentary system in the West. Thus, the East had a planned economy where politicians and civil servants determined things, and the West had a free market economy where entrepreneurs and ultimately consumers decide. In the East, simple things like bananas or oranges were scarce, and long lines sometimes sent people home empty-handed. Zitelmann talks about how master planners in a socialist-style market believe that they can provide what you want rather than the consumers. The brain drain, as they call it, went from 1945 to 1961, where East Germans migrated to the West for a better life. It never went the other way around. With so many people migrating and leaving their socialist utopia, in August of 1961 they built the Berlin Wall. The Eastern German government called it the anti-fascist wall, but really it was a wall to keep East Germans in. They basically made East Berlin a prison, with the guns pointing inward rather than outward. East Germany was famous for making the worst cars in the world, the old Trabant, or Trabi as it's called. East Germany also had the lignite coal plant, which produced some of the highest pollution levels per capita in the world. So Zitelmann makes the astute point that people think that capitalism produces the greatest pollution, but it's actually socialist and communist countries that are the biggest polluters. And obviously China is a great example of this. In East Germany, they also had a rent freeze, which was a continuation of National Socialist or Nazi policy. Now, a rent freeze may sound good, but it made the apartments uninhabitable. Zitelmann's documentary cleverly shows the sharp contrast of buildings in East Germany then and now. Listen to the sharp differences like this.
When I was young, we lived in the West, and our telephone looked just like this one. And even our telephone book looked like this, but it was much thicker. Why? Because in the West, 99% had a telephone, and in the East, it was 16%.
Ja, und dann gab es natürlich auch kein Telefon und keine Zentralheizung. Sowas gab es alles.
The East German leaders always promised to overtake the West, but it never happened. There was economic stagnation, political oppression, and widespread dissatisfaction. The socialist planned economy was failing.
And Zitelmann ends his documentary concluding that free markets and capitalism make life better for all of us. Life Behind the Berlin Wall is a great reminder of how starkly different socialism and communism are from free market capitalism. Yet some still live under this style of oppression. It's hard to imagine not having your own private toilet or bathroom, but that was reality in East Berlin. I spoke with Dr. Zitelmann about not just his documentary, but about other books that he's written, such as the characteristics that many people who have become famous share. He also has done a very careful analysis of Hitler and his National Socialism. So we had a great diversity of topics to cover. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Dr. Rainer Zitelmann.
So it's Dr. Rainer Zitelmann. How do you say it in German?
In German you say Dr. Rainer Zitelmann.
Rainer Zitelmann.
Ah, you're
well.
I
studied German when I was as a classical singer.
Oh,
so
yes.
I can get a little. I can jump on that. Dr. Zitelmann, you are an entrepreneur, an author, a real estate investor, a historian, and a sociologist. I hope I got all those right.
Yes.
You cover many sociological topics, and I'm really interested in your book, How People Become Famous, where you analyze everyone from Einstein to Donald Trump to Kim Kardashian. Tell me what these famous people all had in common.
There are a lot of things that they have in common. One thing, appearance matters. Think about Trump's hair cut, for example, or Kim Kardashian made her butt even to her brand, yes,
right.
Or Arnold Schwarzenegger, the bicep. And so this is one thing. The other thing is it helps if you have some provocative statements sometimes. Donald Trump is a perfect example for this, but not only him. But what is very important, you will not get famous by chance or by accident. It's by purpose. All of these people, I analyzed 12 different people in my book, and all of this, they really had the goal to be famous. So this is very important.
So there was a purpose to it.
Absolutely, it was a purpose. Maybe later they tell you, oh, it happened and I didn't want it, so, but this is not true. If you analyze their career, even people where you wouldn't expect it, as Albert Einstein or Stephen Hawking, true scientists, and you wouldn't expect it, but they were very crazy to get famous.
So would you argue that Donald Trump's shameless self-promotion and his branding led him to become president and continues to keep that brand etched in people's minds?
Yes, absolutely. This is one of his assets, but of course he has also a lot of negative things that make people upset, but it helped him anyway. Even this provocative attitude, for example, against political correctness. And we know he lied very often, so, but for people, he said always the truth, because they have the feeling he says what he thinks, not as other
conviction.
Yes, authentic. Yeah. It seems to be authentic.
And people craved authenticity.
Yes, absolutely.
At a time of complete artifice, I suppose. Well, in another one of your books, The Rich in Public Opinion, you talk about the concept of upper classism, and I want you to discuss that, which you say is often socially encouraged. Can you digress on that concept and whether you consider it punching up?
Yes, absolutely. First, maybe, why did I write a book about this, prejudice and stereotypes against rich people? Because there are so many books, prejudice against women, against black people, against Jewish people, even there are books about prejudice against overweighted people. But there was not one book about prejudice and stereotypes against wealthy people. And I think it's a minority, as other minorities are. And so I commissioned a poll. It's done now in 11 different countries, and I calculated something that I call the social envy coefficient. So you can compare different countries, how envious are people. And at the top are French people, followed by German people, and the least envious people are in Asia, especially in Japan and in South Korea, or in Vietnam. People in Vietnam, they admire rich people. They see them as role models. And we are here in the West today, we see them much too often as scapegoats. If everything does not go well, I will predict now with inflation, it will not take a long time, and then they will find scapegoats for inflation, because I think the central bank and the politicians, it's their fault, but of course they don't want to take the fault.
But the 1% always get that negativity, because they always say tax the rich, they need to pay their fair share, and it's become, it seems taboo to be wealthy. Is that what your argument is, that it's easy to attack them?
Yes, absolutely. And there's a difference. Today you can't say any negative things about any minority. People are not only sensitive, but they're hypersensitive. If you say a wrong word about any minority, everyone gets upset. Right. But if you say the craziest things about rich people, it seems to be okay. I give you an example from my country, where I'm from. I'm come from Berlin, from Germany. And there were protesters, demonstrations with posters, kill your landlord, for example, kill your landlord. Imagine there would be a poster, kill black people or kill Muslims. Everyone would be outraged, and rightly so. Right. But there it seems to be no problem. Look what they did here in Washington, D.C. I think they placed a guillotine in front of the house of Jeff Bezos. A guillotine, yes. So you can say everything negative and hate speech against rich people. No one will criticize you for this, but I criticize it.
Because it's socially acceptable to do so.
Yes, it is socially acceptable. This is the problem.
Well, let's shift to another guy that you've studied, Adolf Hitler. You studied his National Socialism in great detail. What did you uncover in your book about his economic philosophy, and do you see any parallels to that today in the United States?
Hitler was much more anti-capitalist and socialist than most people think. It's wrong to say he's right-wing in this way. Okay. It would also be not okay to say he's a classical socialist, because classical socialists, they wanted to nationalize all private property. This is what he didn't want to do. He had another philosophy. He said, I will tell the entrepreneurs what to do, what to invest. And if they do so, I'm fine with this. But if not, then I will tell them what they have to do, or the state will do it by itself. This was his idea of National Socialism.
And do you see that happening at all in the United States today in our system here?
I wouldn't compare Adolf Hitler, you know, because he was one of the mass murder and all this, so I wouldn't compare him with...
But what about those ideas of nationalizing industry and telling entrepreneurs what to do?
Yes, of course, and it's not only the United States, it's also in Europe. It's almost everywhere in the world. There's a difference. Look, in the 80s, we were very successful. In the 90s, everywhere in the world. Why? People believed in free market, in capitalism, and everywhere. It was Ronald Reagan, it was Maggie Thatcher. Even in China, it was Deng Xiaoping. In Sweden, we had pro-market reforms. In Germany. And now today, the states fight back, you know. And we have the opposite tendency. Everywhere, people believe that the state can run an economy better than entrepreneurs. And of course, this is a crazy idea. Why? Because it always failed in history. In the last 100 years, we had more than 2,000 experiments with socialism, and they failed without any exception.
So why do governments still experiment with them and toy with them like they're idealistic?
I think, of course, it's much easier to maximize the results from voters. Yes? If you tell them, I will give you this and this and this subsidy, it's much easier than to tell them you're responsible. I was now on a tour about my books in Latin America. This was very interesting.